Hold on to hope. It will not abandon you. The eternal conflict continues between the forces of good and evil. For darkness will triumph over those who give into despair, but despair cannot defeat the power of hope. Hope is the voice that will never be silent. Hope is the spring that fills the wells of courage. Hope is the light in the darkness. And in the darkness, we will be that light. For in the dawn, beauty reigns, and the way is clearer. In an age when shadows grew long and the sun seemed weary of rising, there was born to Faerun a man touched by the stars themselves, a prodigy known as Samasta. Brown-haired, with eyes like wells of somberity, he was chosen by the goddess Mystra herself, an honor so great that even the most aged archmages of Myth Drana whispered his name with reverence. Magic thrummed in his very bones, and for a time he walked as a steward of learning, an architect of the weave's subtle artistry. But power, like fire, is a fickle companion if left unattended. It warms, yes, but it also consumes. In the chambers of his own genius, Samasta began to hear whispers that did not belong to Mystra. They sang of deathless splendor, of eternal rule, of the majesty of scale and claw. Dead dragons shall rule the world entire, he muttered first as warning, then as a prophecy, and finally as a divine decree. Thus, with the fervor of a mad messiah, he founded the cult of the dragon, that grotesque congregation of draconic tongues and bone, who believed not in gods of glory, but in dracoliches cloaked in shadow. Towers crumbled, tombs were opened, gold flowed like rivers into the lairs of the dead. What once were dragons became vessels of death, undying lords wrapped in tyranny and the stench of crypts. The harpers, ever the stewards of balance and light, rose in defiance. They crossed continents in pursuit of Samasta's growing cult, undoing covens, banishing necromancers, and weeping over the smoking remains of sacred groves defiled by undead worms. But even the boldest harper blade could not undo a chosen of Mystra. So it was that the harpers turned their gaze eastward, toward the dawn. In the twilight hour before battle, beneath a bleeding sky, the priests of the Morning Lord gathered. With robes stained by blood and sorrow, they knelt and sang. Their voices, cracked and trembling, reached the ears of Lathander, the Morning Lord, the bringer of the new dawn, and he came. His radiance broke the veil of night. The wind now wept with joy. Lathander's avatar stood upon the battlefield, not as some distant seraph of judgment, but as hope incarnated, just at the moment they needed it. A blazing flame in armor of sunrises, his mace gleaming like the first light of spring, his voice echoing with wrath, creativity, and with hope. Hope is the light of the darkness, and in the darkness we will be that light. For in the dawn, beauty reigns, and the way is clearer. Samasta answered with dracoliches, his undead, and then fire. Lathander and the chosen of Mystra clashed with the armies beneath them. Their battle was a symphony of magical acuity and radiance. Arcane sigils collided with solar flares. The very weave screamed. Trees turned to ash in an instant. "Stand aside," Samasta commanded, voice echoing with a dozen dragon tongues. "The future belongs to the undying." The Morning Lord did not flinch. His mace, Dawn Speaker, forged from the breath of the first sunrise, rose in his hand. "You seek eternity, of dead dragons who rule this material world," said Lathander. "Your decay will not stand, for I bring renewal. I bring hope." Samasta struck first. A torrent of necrotic flame twisted from his staff, screaming like lost souls. Lathander answered with a flare of radiance so blinding that shadows Samasta had summoned recoiled. Where the fire struck, it sizzled against divine light, turning to a harmless mist. But the chosen of Mystra was no simplistic mortal. Samasta then cried, somatic components weaving together, and finally, he summoned a worm of bone and lightning, a dragon wrought from death and the prophecies he had once read. It soared down with a thunderous roar and met the Morning Lord's gaze. A single gesture, a single word in the dawn speech, and the construct disintegrated into 1,000 motes of golden starlight. Infuriated, Samaster raised both arms and uttered a necromantic draconic spell, an incantation laced with threads of Mistra's power. It lashed out, a cosmic blade, cleaving into Lathander's side. The Morning Lord staggered. The heavens dimmed, and Mount Celestia listened with intent. 4 drops of blood fell. The world stood still. Lathander's face twisted not with pain, but with sorrow. "You could have been so much more," he whispered. Then came the end. Dawnspeaker flashed once, twice, thrice, striking like the rhythm of a war drum forged in heaven. Samaster's wards crumbled. His spells faltered, and his staff shattered into cinders. And with a cry that was part fury, part freedom, the Morning Lord unleashed the dawn beyond dawn, a surge of celestial radiance that painted the world in his light and memory. But the price was steep. The battlefield, now scarred and glowing with celestial aftermath, was littered with the fallen. Harper blades snapped. Priests lay silent. And amid the broken relics of hope and hate, something stirred. A young priest from the nearby village of Hap, barely more than a boy, stumbled through the carnage and found it. A small pool of golden ichor, divine, pulsing with warmth. He wept as he cupped the blood of his god in trembling hands, pouring it into an amber flask. The flask sealed itself, shimmering with sunrise light. And then it was forgotten. Hidden away in Hap's humble shrine, behind crumbling frescoes and dusty hymns, the relic slumbered. Generations passed. Wars raged. The cult of the dragon rose again, as evil always does. And still the light of Hap, Lathander's blood, waited. For one day, when all seems lost and the stars hide behind ash and despair, it shall be found once more. And in that hour, hope will be the light in the darkness. And in the darkness, we will be that light. For in the dawn, beauty reigns, and the way is clearer. Whenever humans embark on a new journey, enter a contract, or start a political or romantic relationship, chances are good that they whisper a prayer to Lathander, deity of dawn, renewal, and vitality. Though he is among the oldest of the Faerunian Pantheon, the Morning Lord nonetheless retains the cheery optimism of youth that makes him the perfect symbol of beginnings. Ever willing to pass over the defeats of today to focus on the victories of tomorrow, Lathander preaches a doctrine of proactive good works and constant re-evaluation of society's traditions and mores. He also urges the destruction of undead, which he views as a vile corruption that mocks creation and true life. Critics suggest that Lathander's aggressive altruism often gets in the way of his good sense. His vanity and enthusiasm cause him to discount the consequences of his actions. He simply hopes for the best and attacks a problem head-on, regardless of the ramifications. Never was this character flaw so clearly illuminated than during the Dawn Cataclysm, a catastrophe second only to the Time of Troubles, in which Lathander attempted to reshape the entire Pantheon in his own image and thereby triggered a major divine struggle. His ultimate failure resulted in the destruction of several deities and powerful outsiders, led to the collapse of a half-dozen theocracies, and presaged the fall of Mithdrana. Despite the failures of the distant past, Lathander's faith remains extremely popular and powerful today, especially among idealistic young nobles, though seldom their parents. They claim to be personally tasked by the Morning Lord to see to the affairs of their lessers, as though their fortuitous accident of noble birth granted them a writ to serve as Lathander's mortal representatives. For many young aristocrats, a foray into Lathanderianism represents a last act of rebellion before accepting the responsibilities of the nobility. Those of truer heart, however, remain in the church and often end up making a profound difference in their community. Commoners appreciate such treatment, making the Morning Lord popular among all social classes. Clerics of Lathander pray at dawn. Most holy services take place just as the light of the sun breaks the horizon, with secondary gatherings occurring at high sun and sunset. Ceremonies are joyful but dignified and feature singing, offerings, and ritual drinking of well water touched by the light of dawn. On midsummer morning and on the mornings of the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, Lathanderian clerics perform the Song of the Dawn, a popular and complex musical ceremony that even attracts non-worshippers to the Morning Lord's cathedrals. Lathander's friendly demeanor makes him almost as popular among other deities as he is among the mortals of Toril. The deities, however, tend to have longer memories than their followers. Many appreciate Lathander's calls to action and altruistic nature, but try to keep him from doing too much damage to the status quo. He gets on well with other idealistic deities such as Eldath and Lyra, or with those such as Luru and Suna, who prefer to focus on the pleasurable and good things in life. The Morning Lord's command over creativity brings him into friendly contact with Ogma, Milil, and Gond, and his unflinching hatred of the undead has made him a fast ally of Kelemvor. Chontia seems to appreciate his exuberance more than any other member of the Ferunian Pantheon, perhaps because it brightens her ancient soul. She and Lathander believe that their fates are intertwined, and while their romance has faded and flared intermittently over the centuries, they always seem to return to each other. Lathander somewhat naively holds evil deities such as Bane, Cyric, Loviatar, and Talos personally responsible for the majority of Toril's ills. He particularly dislikes Shah, whom he views as an eternally corrupting force, the foul cancer at the heart of every shadowy intrigue against him and his church. Lathander believes that the Dawn Cataclysm occurred because spies of the Lady of Loss secretly corrupted his efforts, and he is hatching plans to ensure that does not happen again. Helm harbors ill feelings toward the Morning Lord that date back to the Dawn Cataclysm, when Lathander indirectly caused the destruction of Helm's Lower Murdain, a lesser deity of reason and pragmatism. No doubt the Vigilant One would be chagrined to learn that Lathander has, since the time of troubles, been working on some of the incantations and machinations that brought about that catastrophe so long ago. Ogma, Chauntea, and Lyra know of Lathander's plans, but so far, each has remained silent. With the return of Bane, many priests of Lathander believe that direct action must be taken to destroy evil once and for all, and that no unintended consequences of Lathander's plans could be as threatening to the world as simply standing by and doing nothing. When the sky is still cloaked in the hush of deepest night, before even the earliest birds dare their first song, I walk among you. You do not always see me. Sometimes I am the dew on the vine, sometimes the smile of a child or the hand offered to lift a stranger. But I am there. I am always there, for I am the promise of the morning, the golden breath before the world stirs anew. I am Lathander, the dawn, and I tell you now as the first light crests the rooftops of this world, we are not yet finished. Let me tell you of the first light. There was a time when even the gods despaired, when betrayal had shattered trust, and mortals huddled in ruins, too tired to rebuild their broken kingdoms. Death had ruled the land in silence and shadows, and the gardens of hope were untended, wilting. But from that silence, I rose as a gardener, with hands sunk in the soil. I did not seek vengeance, but growth. I planted the first light in the hearts of mortals. And though it was small, though it trembled, it grew. This is my charge to you, children of the dawn. Plant that same light wherever you go. Strive always to aid. When others fall, lift them. When minds are closed, open them. When life falters, kindle it anew. A single whisper of hope can outshine a scream of fear. From your fingers, let new ideas bloom. From your words, let communities rise. From your compassion, let weary souls believe again. For what is a God of the morning if not a God of the next dawn? Perfect yourselves with perseverance. Be fertile in mind, open in heart. Create, craft, build. And if what you make crumbles, do not despair. Build again. The sunrise is relentless, and so must you be. And remember this always, dear ones. From death comes life. A seed must rest in darkness before it may sprout. A forest must burn before wildflowers grow. Even sorrow feeds the root of joy in the aftermath. So turn your face to the sun, even when rain falls. Especially when rain falls. Avoid the cold, bitter comfort of cynicism. Let others say the world is broken, and you can say it is being reborn in the light of the new day. Each day, watch the sunrise. Truly watch it. See how it burns the night without hate, how it brings warmth to even the stone. Let that be your way. Let your greatest offering be the act of helping others. Let your greatest temple be in the open sky. And if you must fight, and you must, for darkness does not yield politely, then fight for renewal and for hope. Purge the rot, uproot the undead who mock the sacred cycle. Send them to rest and bless the soil where they lay. You are my hands, you are my voice, you are my light. Those who stood idle will be left behind in shadow, but those who nurtured, who lifted, who created, they shall inherit the dawn. So rise, Dawnbringers, today and tomorrow and all the days after. Rise and plant hope. Rise and burn bright. Rise and be the light in the darkness. For in the dawn, beauty reigns, and the way is clearer. Golden dawnlight streams through the rose-tinted windows of Waterdeep's grandest temple. A soft choral hymn reverberates in the distance as incense curls through the sunlight. Seated at a broad table within a side chamber, strewn with parchment, half-finished illustrations, and a few crumbs of seed cake, are two old companions. Volathamp Geddarn, quill in hand, and radiating theatrical enthusiasm, and Elminster Ormar, sipping from a chipped teacup and eyeing the scrolls with a seasoned scholar's skepticism. Hope, Volo murmured, adjusting the cuffs of his embroidered sleeve. The only virtue with purpose, for without it, what meaning has suffering? Now that is a line worth carving into marble. Elminster exhaled, not quite a sigh. Aye. Though most folk misunderstand what that means. It's not about ignoring pain, it's about enduring it, because there's light beyond time. Oh yes, precisely, Volo exclaimed, already scribbling. Though I'd add, Lathander himself wouldn't wait for the light, he is the light. He'd declare there's no use suffering quietly when you could turn your agony into a sunrise. And there it is, Elminster muttered dryly. You've managed to turn theology into theatre again. Volo only grinned. Come now, El. Isn't that what Lathander would want? A bit of drama, a bit of glory. He's the Morning Lord, the commander of creativity. He'd rather see a soul shout hope into the void than whisper it in a corner. True, Elminster allowed, setting down his cup. But don't mistake his exuberance for carelessness. Beneath the rose-hued charm is an ancient will. Older than nations, for he was one of the first. His hope has weight behind it. Like a sunrise crashing through the clouds, Volo added. And have you seen how he appears? Sometimes like a youth in golden robes, sometimes as a swirl of rose-coloured mist with glowing eyes. Glowing eyes, El. I've seen it, Elminster replied with a knowing smirk. And no, you didn't meet him once in the Moonsea. That was a steam mephit with sunburn. I maintain he winked at me, Volo said with complete seriousness. Anyway, the clergy, radiant and rhapsodic, they don't just talk about hope, they build it. Temples in barren lands, shrines in forgotten ruins. They plant seeds, real and metaphorical. They also bleed for it, Elminster added. They fight monsters. They aren't stagnant. They continually make room for gardens, libraries, and laughter. Which reminds me, Volo said, flipping through his notes. The Lathanderites sponsor poetry, contests, wrestling matches, even archery tournaments. I once won a sculpture contest in Arabelle, you know. Terrible piece. But the judges appreciated my spirit. I'm sure they did, Elminster said, without conviction. These events are meant to bring people together, from nobles to peasants. Everyone gets a chance to shine. Yes, yes, Volo beamed. That's the very heart of the faith. Rebirth, renewal, growth, and always a touch of art. Even the funerals, they don't mourn with dirges, but with candlelight and hope. The going down, Elminster said, folding his hands. A quiet farewell before the sun returns, followed by the dawn and the promise that life continues. But no such rites for those meant to return. Lathander understands the difference between death and pause. I did hear quite a few tales of Kelemvor and Lathander speaking on renewal. A fascinating debate. Volo blinked. That's rather profound. Don't get used to it. They both chuckled, and a moment of silence passed as light shifted through the stained glass overhead. Still, Volo said, voice softer, it's not just the pageantry, is it? Lathander demands action. Hope must be practiced. You must rise and rise again. Aye, Elminster nodded. And in places where despair, ruin, and rot from the nine hells and the abyss takes place, his orders carry the flame. The Sun Soul monks, the Knights of the Aster, they are his hands in the darkness. Lanterns in the fog, Volo whispered, jotting it down. Yes, perfect, because the dawn doesn't wait. It pushes through. Even when you think all is lost, the Morning Lord believes healing is not only possible, it's inevitable. And he's willing to fight for that, Elminster said. That's where his joy meets steel. Not all battles end in victory, but to Lathander, even a loss can be the start of something brighter. Volo leaned back, setting his quill down and gazing at the shafts of morning light across the tiles. Well then, El, shall we write him not as a god of sunshine and sermons, but of struggle and the sunrise, of the first breath after despair? Elminster's eyes twinkled. Let's write him as he is, the call to rise, a rise to betterment, and to accept that even in defeat there is a wisdom to be gained if we can sit in the despair and then choose to rise again. Volo smiled, lifting his quill once more. Then let this volume of mine, Volothamp's glorious guide to the Morning Lord, begin with a promise. Hope is the light in the darkness, and in the darkness we will be that light. For in the dawn, beauty reigns, and the way is clearer. Elminster raised a brow. You stole that line. Volo winked. Borrowed. Lathander won't mind. Volo smiled, lifting his quill once more. Lathander's faithful encourage the rebirth of barren areas and more productive growth in cultivated lands, drive out evil, and either restore civilization to heights it once had, or lead it to new dizzying heights of interracial harmony, cooperation, and pursuit of the arts and progress. To do this, they battle monsters to nurture civilization. They plant seeds and tend seedlings. They encourage and aid inventors, travelers, traders, and pilgrims as the harbingers of culture. And they recover lost, magical items, pieces of literature, and works of art. Lathanderites study, restore, and attempt to duplicate, emulate, or expand upon these recovered items and works when possible. Temples and shrines also sponsor athletic events and competitions where people of all classes and races can strive together in non-lethal competition. In wrestling, distance throwing, target archery, running, jumping, horseback riding, or any of a number of other non-injurious sports. Other competitions sponsored by Lathanderian churches are for honours in the literary and fine arts. Such competitions are usually for a prize, which may be money, a special item or piece of art, or even a work written about the victor by a famous poet or artist. Winning a competition sponsored by the Lathanderites brings great status in certain circles. Lathanderites are expected to make regular offerings of ideas, inventions, coins, discovered artifacts, or food to Lathanderian temples and shrines. Much more valuable offerings such as magical items or quantities of gold are demanded of non-believers in return for special services like rescue missions or healing from the dead. And so, dear reader, if you find yourself in a land once desolate now bursting with blooms, or at a village festival where dwarves arm wrestle tieflings beneath banners stitched in sunrise silk, tip your hat to the Morning Lord. For where his faithful walk, art flourishes, monsters flee, and hope dances like golden fire upon the hills. Yes, yes, these bright-robed bringers of dawn do more than chant hymns and sip spring water. They build the future. They recover forgotten relics and turn them into inspiration, turn strangers into neighbors, and transform a morning prayer into a movement. If ever you stumble across a Lathanderite shrine, be it a marble spire gleaming over a bustling city, or a humble altar nestled in a reborn grove, pause, breathe, feel the warmth behind your ribs. That, my friend, is not indigestion. That is hope. And if they ask for a small donation, well, I do hope you've brought an artifact or two, or at least a good idea and a bit of leftover pie. Volathamp, Gedarm, chosen of charm, chronicler of the celestial, and herald, unofficial, of the Morning Lord's most magnificent deeds. I will leave you, dear reader, with this. And yes, it speaks for itself. Hold on to hope. It will not abandon you. The eternal conflict continues between the forces of good and evil. Darkness will triumph over those who give in to despair, but despair cannot defeat the power of hope. Hope is the voice that will never be silent. Hope is the spring that fills the wells of courage. Hope is the light in the darkness. And in the darkness, we will be that light. For in the dawn, beauty reigns, and the way is clearer.